Live from Venturex Studios, it's JP, Kathy, and the crew.
The crew. Good morning. Happy Monday. Hope your weekend was well.
Woo-hoo!
Yesterday, 99 degrees yesterday. Humidity is out of control as well.
Yeah, like the humidity was so bad Saturday night. Walked out of an air-conditioned building, and literally car was parked in the front center row, so super close, was literally wiping back beads of sweat and limping because the humidity kills my knee. So good morning and happy Monday and happy week to you, the crew.
And what that leads us right into, we got Dr. Norm Clothier joining us from Family Healthcare Associates. You know, Dr. Clothier, the heat has kind of snuck up on us.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Was it warm? Oh, you did say 99. It's June, and so it's technically still spring until about June 21st, but I do believe you're right that we've had a moderate winter with a lot of rain, as we were talking about a minute ago, how, it's rained so much and the temperatures have been held down. I think summer is about to hit in terms of the weather, and then, of course, soon the actual date, which doesn't matter. But it is really hot, and I was out doing some yard work yesterday, and I observed the humidity, or I felt it, and I was just thinking about, it's a good time to review heat safety because it's a real issue. It's a real issue for me. It's a real issue for all of us. And so we need to talk some strategy there and some just being careful because you can get overwhelmingly hot very quickly. And yesterday I noticed too, the air just wasn't moving much, very low breeze. And of course that leads to the humidity, and all the rain we've had recently has increased the humidity factor in the air. So one of our primary means of temperature control for our bodies is to sweat. And that plays a very important role in heat safety. One thing is, when it's really humid, you cannot sweat as effectively. You may be wet, but you're not sweating in terms of evaporation allowing the body to cool. So the effectiveness mechanism there of sweating, being wet, being in humid conditions is such that you can't exchange temperature as easily with the environment and release that. So you get very, very hot at your core very quickly. Having said that, you need to make sure that you are sweating a lot. If you're not sweating much, you need to drink more fluid right then. And you really need to drink fluid before you go out in the heat. Being proactive about it is real key. But if you start to observe that you're not sweating as much, and I hope you could observe that because by then you could have a little mental clouding from the heat too. But just make sure you drink a lot of fluid. And you need to be drinking fluid to the point where you literally need to urinate. You need to go to the bathroom. If you're not drinking enough and not urinating, you're going to be behind on your fluid content very quickly. So I drank about 5 liters of fluid yesterday of water while I was out, and I still was, really too hot, frankly. And but when the temperature, I've always observed, our average human body temperature is 98.6 degrees. Of course, some people run lower before the comments come in that 97.4 is normal for them. I'm sure it is. But we average 98.6. And so to average that, people have to run a little higher, sometimes a little lower, sometimes. But the key is when the ambient temperature or environmental temperature exceeds that body temperature, you really can't exchange that heat off the body effectively either. And that's where, you've got to just be incredibly careful to hydrate, get in the shade, don't be in the sun in that kind of heat because it'll just bake you, even more. And wear light-colored clothing, cover your skin, don't get scorched. But use something very light and airy. There are all kinds of moisture-wicking, fabrics now, and shirts with vents and whatever. And all those are very important because you can keep ventilating the skin, but not over-scorch with the sun. But it's just very important.
Well, and you said, you said something about when you feel like your mental acuity is slipping a little bit. So explain to us more about that. So not when you're chilled out, maybe you're in the pool relaxing. I know my husband, he went to a friend's house yesterday to just kind of hang out by the pool for a little while. overdid it because the pool was still very cool. And he's like, boy, I've got to watch myself next time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bust your chops with Dr. Clothier tomorrow. But so, okay, mental acuity slipping. You're out there relaxing. You're not working or anything. You're just kicked back. What's a test you can do? How can you tell if you're starting to lose mental capacity?
Here's the problem: is you'll be the last one to know. And so, I think the key is again that the physical signs you can monitor are sweating, need to use the bathroom, and literally consciousness. I mean, if somebody's slipping out or becoming confused, somebody needs to get that person and get them inside or get them into that cool pool water so they can decrease their core temperature. And, that's just one of those things, like if you're, let's say in the worst case scenario, you had to call 911 because somebody collapsed in the heat. One of the very first things they're going to do is give them IV fluid hydration and cooling with literally like ice packs and, maybe a cool bath at the ER, cool water, because you've got to get the core temperature down. So the person who is somewhat confused is going to be the last to know. So let's say you're out in the yard walking around and just feel things. You really need to get into shade first. And then if you can't just get to, if you could, possibly get into a building, get a fan going. The reason fans help is they blow air across the body, so when you sweat, you do a temperature exchange with the sweat and the evaporation component. So if you can get out of humidity into an indoor area, get air moving, that'll help tremendously. I frankly don't think anybody should just sit around a pool in the heat and just sit there because, you're not getting any air exchange over the body. You're going to lose track of time and mental capacity, and you're going to end up getting way too hot at the core. So and that's just true.
Dr. Clothier, let's throw out those fancy medical terms: heat exhaustion, heat stroke. What are the two differences between the two? We'll hear
fancy.
People. Yep. We will hear people always say, "Well, I had a heat stroke yesterday," or I'm stroking. Oh, I'm having a heat exhaustion.
If they say I had a heat stroke yesterday, they did not, and so. That's one way. If they're speaking to you, you can tell. But yeah, those are super fancy terms. Like heat stroke. Sorry, but anyway, what we often use now is heat-related illness. There used to be heat exhaustion, and that's actually a pretty good term, though not very medical. But heat exhaustion is where you've been out and you suddenly feel like you can't move. You may be nauseated. You may literally throw up because the body is diverting so much blood flow from the GI tract to other areas of the body, trying to cool you down, like to the surface of the skin. Many people kind of get sort of a beet red color or at least feel very hot to the touch. And you can get very weak and pass out quickly. And so you really need to be aware of heat exhaustion before heat stroke. And again, that's more commonly now called heat-related illness, if you want to get, into the specifics of it. But to me, it's almost a corollary to, like, for instance, altitude sickness. If you go up to altitude too quickly, you're going to feel sick. You're going to feel nauseated, weak, maybe disoriented. And one of the best things to do is to drink water, drink a lot of water, hydrate the body, and to get down from that altitude if you can. So very similarly with the heat, if you have any kind of symptoms, you need to drink a lot of water and you need to get away from the heat. And so heat-related illness is far more common than heat stroke, thankfully. Heat stroke is devastating. It's where usually the body temperature at the core is 104 degrees or more. You start to get organ damage like kidney failure. You can get brain damage from literally being too hot. You can damage other organs like, just the various liver, GI tract, the heart. It's common to have a heart attack or heart symptoms from a heat stroke. But literally that term stroke means it affects the brain and the blood flow of the organs and the response of the organs. So that can be fatal. It can also be the source of being in the hospital for days trying to recover. You may never fully recover from that. And I think people are a little too flippant with that term. You know, when you say, people tell you they had a heat stroke yesterday, I hear comments like that. I hear people come in and say, oh, yeah, I was out so long, I had a heat stroke and barely could finish mowing my lawn. And I came in, got some lemonade, I felt better. Well, that's not a heat stroke. That's possibly the heat-related illness. But those things are very serious and very real. I remember years ago, I was coaching a T-ball game, which unfortunately for these poor little kiddos, around age 5 and such, it was extremely hot out on early day in May. And, nobody was thinking about the heat, the humidity. We unfortunately were a team called the Rockies, and so we had black jerseys on. And several of the kids even got kind of sick feeling and felt like they couldn't run. And, it was like 2 in the afternoon, and the referee actually passed out, or the umpire, excuse me. Wow. The umpire passed out from the heat. And, so you can't mark the calendar and decide when it's safe to be out. You need to hydrate, and you need to be proactive about it. You need shade as much as possible. I'm a huge fan of skin cover, not only from skin cancer risk, but just from the heat reduction risk of the sun. So like I was saying earlier, light colored clothing, thin clothing, moisture wicking, or at least, breathable clothing fabric can make a big difference. You can get those easily now. Pants, shirt, hat, always keep your head covered. Use a wide brim so that you don't, bake your ears and your face. And, it's just really important. And then there are a lot of, like, I have a hat that is a cooling hat where you put a little water in the top of it, and it has that cooling effect of lower, temperature feel. There are cooling rags you can put around your neck, kind of a similar thing. You activate them with water, and they just feel cooler to you. And it's really important. The back of the neck is a heat releasing area as well as the top of the head. So those two spots